just jumping onto Brian's point there, like so me and my wife use the same e-commerce site account. So you can imagine what happens with my recommendations. It's like all over the show, right?
Yeah, that same connection, same account, and different people acting on that same account. Yeah, that's going to confuse every model.
I don't know, maybe you think about it too much, but the way that I'm looking at it and some of the work that we've been doing is saying that if that personality of that collective behaves in a certain way and gets influenced by recommendations in ways that get them to act basically on the options that you give them from a recommendation point of view, then does it matter if that person is schizophrenic or a unit or a group or anything of the sort, because it eventually, as an organism, gets a personality of its own. So I think that the way we've been reasoning about it is that how much effort would it take to get, Scott, we take your example, and trying to really convince somebody to collect data on their own so you can be more accurate for the individual. But you, over time, will probably realize that as a unit, there are rituals of behavior that will give you some consistency in how they would behave, even though it might be very diverse.
Therefore, you're saying you're treating each bit of behavior as a behavior, and whether it's collected under one group, it is irrelevant because all the behavior is going into the model.
Just going back to Skulk's thing, where him and his wife are, well, I think we can assume that they're quite different from what he said. With them, if the model then picks up that there's quite different parameters, would the model not say, okay, hold on, these things are quite different, not separate out the two behaviors? And because I know that in any one group, there might be more than one player in a group, and then I can maybe pull it out, and then you actually know that there's two people, and then you can track the behaviors independently.
What would that? Yeah, no, exactly. But what would that mean? How would it make the recommender more accurate if it knew that there were two people that are very different? And I think that's the question we keep on asking, isn't it? Is that if it knows that if you had to look at it purely without the social science, let's take a bank example. If you're in the banking world and you go to the dentist, and every time you go to the dentist, you put in fuel. And every time your wife goes to the hair salon, she puts in fuel. But you only go to the dentist once a year, and she goes to the hair salon every 6 weeks. The question is, though, can you then separate those actions, or are those actions all just part of the fact that there's fuel that you put in, and that there are other extraneous events that might seem farther apart? But if you get the recommendation to say you want to sell somebody a special hair product, you would still send it to that unit as a whole. You can't. How will you know who the message will be for? You're not going to know, as the data collection part of it is devoid of that clear separation. There will be behavioral differences and so on, but there might be other families that look just like that. There might be other families that behave the same way, where their behaviors are quite different, and then you can decide. But that means that the personality of that unit can influence your recommendation style.
If the model managed to see that there are two different people, and that Skulk's got meetings the whole day, he's never ever on this channel between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. But for instance, Skulk's whilst on the channel at lunchtime, for instance, then you would know that it's somebody different to Skulk on the channel, because generally Skulk's behavior is after hours.
But how would you know?
You'd have to log in. If the person if they came into that recommendation, so say it's Takealot, if they came in at Takealot and you came in at 12 o'clock at lunchtime, then you know you've got a pretty good idea that it's not Skulk.
But you don't know. That's what I'm saying, Rob. You got no clear mechanism to reliably extract it, and that gets back to the confidence level. You're going to have very little confidence that the behavior are related to 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 people. All you know is that data collection unit behaves in a certain way. It's very difficult, even if you use unsupervised clustering techniques to cluster common times of the day, or so you take time-rated features or other kind of features. It's very difficult to find a way. That means that the recommender just has to know that these things are quite diverse, and it needs to deal with that diversity in that unit. I think that it's the cost of trying to figure out if there are 2 or 3 or 5 people. The story with the target, with the baby nappies and the beer scenario. Nobody cared. At the time, the focus was highly segmented. So that means they recommended the best nappies to to most females after they've had their baby and not during the pregnancy, because you don't need a nappy during pregnancy, you need it afterwards. And most women will not respond to beer. So what happened is they found out that most nappies had, in the context of a basket analysis, co-occurrence with beer or alcohol-related products. And that means that there was no theory if it was a male or a female, but when somebody went and did a deep dive in social science and did some observation study, realized that it's the husband after work that goes and buys the nappies and gets beer at the same time. So that means that would that recommender then recommend a person that buys beer that this nappy is better than another nappy? That's the debate. The thing is that, or would you still recommend it to the wife or to the person who's got the baby to then influence the person that goes and buys it?
We had a scenario years ago, and it's making me wonder if both Jay and I forgot who else was talking, both have points based on the dimensions available, because we were able to successfully make recommendations on a same account to different people, and we used a parameter of the time of day.
Yes. And
just that seemed to gain some traction in improving the outcomes and identifying the source. And it wasn't, of course, 100%, but that dimension allowed to go deeper into dissecting people across accounts.
Yeah, that's a great point, Reed. I think that we are big fans of time series and time-specific related data, so that in a platform we've got enrichment features where you can take a date and you can configure it in a way that you can set up what time of the day it is. You want to set up when it's travel time, breakfast time, lunchtime. You want to even give those times some kind of categorical definition. And then understanding the time of the month, the week of the month, the week of the year, the month of the year. So that whole spectrum, I think, it's hugely important in understanding human related activity and human rituals. That's a great example.
Yeah, from my side, Joe, no, I think Reed sort of answered, and you answered my question. It was just on Skolk's scenario where we have sort of a wide range and different parameters that can be used to do this. Things like click-through events, to say that if it's a session, you probably won't have the same recommender in the same session. So I mean, you'll log on, you'll do something, and you'll log off, and so you can use those parameters.
Because that will probably over time, if you didn't include the time dimension, you will be able to embed the differences in behaviors if one person only ever goes in over, say, a lunchtime period to be able to get whatever it is done that they need to get done. That the time dimension will help you to give a more accurate view of that particular activity, if it's the same person or not, because you're not going to know if it's another person or not. Yeah, that's great.
So uses many different parameters as possible to identify that. Well, it's not a concern, but if you look at a wide range like that, if you look at my music taste, I listen to almost anything. Okay, and if I log in and I'm in a mood, so different moods. If I'm in a mood to listen to metal, I don't want my recommender to keep on recommending reggae. So I mean, it's exactly the same, guys. It's not a timing thing. It just depends on how I feel at that specific point. So shouldn't the recommender be able to pick up as you start what you are doing? If you start listening to metal, it shouldn't think about reggae or anything. It should stick to that genre and recommend more music.
But that's the thing, though. But if you keep on behaving in the same way, recommenders almost always converge. And Eric will talk about it in a moment. I mean, you keep on converging onto the same thing, and that's a problem, because that means that you keep on recommending things that, I can give you a really silly example. And one day I was working and I was commuting to the States, and I was sitting alone at home, and I realized that we ran out of toilet paper. So what I do is I jump onto Amazon and I bought toilet paper as an emergency item so it can be delivered 30 minutes later. I had some people coming to visit, so I wanted to make sure everything was sorted. I couldn't drive to the store. Delivered it to me, and for the next 2 years, all I got as my number one recommendation were 100 different variations of toilet paper. So what happened is that's the opposite problem. So that means that if you buy it all the time, it only recommends things like that. Or what it does, it says if there's something that's extraneous and it's an emergency item, they might need this all the time. So the idea is you need to find a recommender that can control that intervention, and you can tweak the results continuously. Yeah, so that's why I think the music one is also a good one. You want to be able to converge on the things that people like most of the time, and then you want to be able to test the things that they will be interested in. And you want to know that if you keep on recommending things they're interested in and they ignore it, you need to keep on narrowing it down until the person might only listen to something that they truly want to find very different, say once a year, where other people might want to find different music on a daily basis. So you need to find a combination of that. Yeah, that was a good one. Okay, let's take one more and then we can get into some of the tech. Jacques?
So just one thing that I'm thinking is in terms of, let's say, two people sharing an account or the toilet paper example, is there like, if you could split it between, let's say, using short-term data and long-term data. So for instance, if you're checking out beers, then you don't, and they know for some reason it's a shared account, and then you just get items related to beer and you don't go, like for instance, if it's like a year later, you're not going to keep on recommending nappies. Like for each product, you've got a different. So for instance, I don't know exactly, but I think you get what I'm saying, is you.
Yeah, I get it.
In some situations, you only use the recent data, and in other situations, you can go far back and collect long-term data.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that comes back to some of the things earlier, like confidence levels and so on. So if you have a huge amount of confidence in a generic feature, like something that you sell that is highly ritualistic, or something that you provide to your client base that you find is taken up all the time, you can make that basically a long-term cycle of training where your time periods can be longer and your model training could be slower. But then you get all the way down to models that you might train on a weekly basis or maybe on a daily basis. And in the ultimate situation, you want to train all of the variations of the individual itself in real time. So that means that you want to have that stack score in an ensemble, so that you can have the less you know about the person's immediate actions, the more you drop into the models that give you the long-term view. So I think that's how we've been using data that has got long-term versus short-term impact, so that you can really take care of, even if you just had to take the existing long-term rituals, you'll be able to serve somebody better than trying to do it manually or trying to not have any understanding of those interactions. Is that Jacques? Is that?
Yes, it's just a quick example. What I'm thinking is if someone, what did I want to say? Oh, some accounts you use more short-term data, for example, and other accounts you use the long-term data. I don't know if the model can figure something like that out.
Yeah, definitely. So model selection, yeah, for sure. Maybe one or two, Eric and I was trying to set up one today. We didn't have enough time to get it done, but the idea was to show how you can have like 10, 20, 30 models, and each model will do something different. You stack them all together, and we've got other stacked models that we can also show you. But they are definitely, we love that approach, because I think that sometimes what happens is that we get excited, or we spend so much time trying to get one model to fit all of our problems that we really get stuck. And what you want to do is you want to find ways to fragment it so that your time horizon is something that is really a core dimension. And especially if you have somebody that behave very differently on a day-by-day basis, you want to be able to get models that are quite specialized just to the individual.